أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا Muhammad وآله الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to another episode of A Drop from the Sea, short ulama stories from the book of Ayatullah Shubayri Zanjani. We have reached entry number 10 in volume 1, and in entry number 10 we have a very short story of Akhund Mulla Lutfullah Mazandarani. Akhund Mulla Lutfullah Mazandarani was a scholar, passed away in 1311 Hijri, which is around 1894, end of the 19th century. And this story that I'm about to say is a story that I have already translated and published on Iqra Online, so I will just read through it very quickly. Ayatullah Shubayri Zanjani quoted this story on a Thursday, 26th of Zil Hijjah in 1429 Hijri. He says that I have heard from Mirza Hashim Amuli, Ayatullah Mirza Hashim Amuli, that somebody had seen in a dream the palace of Sheikh Ansari and Akhund Mulla Lutfullah Mazandarani. And Akhund was in the ranks of Sheikh Ansari's students. So Lutfullah Mazandarani was one of the students of Sheikh Ansari, and he was a contemporary of Mirza Shirazi. Mirza Shirazi is going to be the next entry. And he was one of the high-ranking scholars. However, he saw in his dream that the Sheikh's palace, Sheikh Ansari's palace, was smaller than the palace of Akhund Mulla Lutfullah Mazandarani. And it did not have the same greatness as the palace of Sheikh Lutfullah. Meaning Sheikh Lutfullah's palace was bigger than Sheikh Ansari. He was surprised as to why the palace of Sheikh Ansari was smaller, despite his great status, piety, and asceticism. Okay, Sheikh Ansari was the teacher and far more learned, and his zuhud is well known. So how come his palace in this dream that he's seeing is smaller than Sheikh Lutfullah? At that very moment, he sort of got an inspiration, and he was inspired with the answer that because the position of leadership was given to Sheikh Ansari in this dunya, in this world, over here, it resulted in a sort of deduction for him in the hereafter. So he got a share of this leadership and position and status. He got that in the dunya, which Sheikh Lutfullah never got, right? So in the hereafter, there was a little bit of something that was deducted from that. Whereas Akhund Mulla Lutfullah did not receive any share to such a position, and therefore was given more of it in the hereafter. Okay, so this is just a dream, right? It's just a dream. It really doesn't tell us anything about what will happen to these ulama in heaven, and who will get a bigger palace and who will get a smaller palace. These are just dreams, but if they happen to have some truth to them, which is very difficult to claim, a dream like this could possibly still be explained, because this dream is not belittling Sheikh Ansari. Okay, it just means that there are certain actions that you do whose results, the results of those good deeds, you see them while you're alive. You see the result of them while you're alive, but there are many good deeds that you do, but their reward, you will not see them in this dunya, but you will only see them in the akhirah. Okay, and then there are some deeds whose rewards you're going to see in this dunya and in the akhirah. And what it's trying to say is that Sheikh Lutfullah's good deeds, he's seeing the result of them in the akhirah. Okay, it's not saying that Sheikh Ansari's deeds were less or fewer or anything like that. Okay, this dream doesn't mean that. Okay, so that's with respect to this story. And that's it. It was just one small story about Sheikh Lutfullah, and shows us about the greatness of this scholar. Entry number 11 is Mirza Muhammad Hasan Shirazi. Died in 1312 Hijri, around 1896. Now, in volume 1, in this volume 1, Ayatollah Zanjani also has a very lengthy paper in the beginning of this book on the life of Mirza Shirazi. So it says in this that for more information you can go refer to that article that is published already here. Now this story he is telling and narrating on the 1st of Ramadan, 1428 Hijri. He says that in the biographies of Mirza Hasan Shirazi, it has been reported that he was very, very mubadi adab. Mubadi adab means somebody who has really, really good akhlaq when it comes to dealing with other people. Okay, this is what it means over here. And he says that when he would meet people, he was very, very friendly, very courteous, and he was very respectful. And whenever he would meet other people, he would always ask them about, how are they doing, and how is their father, how is their mother, how's your family. He would, ask a lot of these questions to make the other person feel very comfortable and welcome. And Ayatullah Zanjani says that he would be so friendly with some people that many people started to think that he's only like this with them. So he would make people feel special, right? And people would feel that Mirza Shirazi, he's so close to us. We're so close to him. He thinks so good of us that he goes out of his way to ask us these questions about our family and so on. And sometimes people will think that he's only like this with them, whereas in reality he was like this with many other, or pretty much with everyone. So this sometimes happens, like some of the ulama, they ask you these questions and then you start feeling special, especially if you're just like a layman or a commoner. You start feeling special, as if the scholar has a specific relationship just with you, but you don't know. These ulama, they have relationships with many other people similar to yours, or maybe even closer to them than yours. Okay, so that's one story. Another story he has here is about the knowledge of Mirza Shirazi. He says that some people have narrated from Mirza Rashti. Okay, Mirza Habibullah Rashti is one of the students of Sheikh Ansari. Maybe there's a I don't know if there's an entry of him in this book, but he does come in these books when it talks about Sheikh Hadi Tehrani and all of that. We'll come to those discussions. He says somebody narrates, people narrate from Mirza Habibullah Rashti that he said that when Sheikh Ansari passed away, he basically gave away his knowledge, or like we inherited his knowledge. He gave his knowledge to me, and he gave the aql, the intellectual strength, to Mirza Hasan Shirazi, and his zuhud, his akhlaq, and his asceticism, he took it with himself. Okay, so he says, Mirza Habibullah Rashid says, the ilm he gave to me, the aql he gave to Mirza Shirazi, and his akhlaq, he took him with himself. Nobody could, he wasn't able to give that to anyone. It was so good, like people couldn't really come up to that level. And then immediately Ayatollah Zanjani says this transmission is false. This is wrong. He said this is not correct, because the students of Mirza Shirazi are, he says, khayli muqaddam Hasan. He says the students of Mirza Shirazi are way better and way stronger than the students of Mirza Habibullah Rashdi. Because Habibullah Rashdi is saying we got the knowledge, and Mirza Shirazi just got the aql, not that knowledge, just the strength. And Sheikh Ayatollah Zanjani is saying, no, look at the students of Mirza Shirazi. Akhund Khurasani, Ismail Sadr, Muhammad Taqi Shirazi, Ayatullah Sayyid Muhammad Fishariki. He says these are all top-notch ulama and maraji of their time, and they are all actually students of Mirza Shirazi. And he says even Mirza Shirazi, from the perspective of his intellectual thought, is way, way stronger. And all of these students were under the influence of Mirza Shirazi. And in fact, they would all propose and put forth the name of Mirza Shirazi as a marja of taqleed to the people. So he says this qawl, this naqal, this transmission, people that narrate it, he says this is batil and it's wrong, it's incorrect. Even though he's saying Mirza Habibullah Rashdi is from the atqiya, he says he's definitely from the pious ulama and pious scholars. But this narration of his that people narrate from him, Ayatollah Zanjani said this is not correct. Okay. Then he has a little bit of a joke over here. He says sometimes, he says my own father. Ayatollah Zanjani says that my own father, whose father was Sayyid Ahmad Zanjani, he says that he would narrate from Mirza Shirazi that to some people I give them money so that they can hold my hands and hold on to me, and then I can, teach them and train them. I'm desperate to, keep them motivated. So I pay them the stipend, the shahriya. And then he says, some people I give them money so that they can leave me alone. Some people are just, annoying, they're lazy, they're not serious, and I don't want them to be around me. So I give them money to be like, hey, you know what, just take your stipend, go feed yourself and live your life and just leave me alone. So he said this was like a humorous statement that he would say, and then he kind of just leaves it there. So this is the chapter on Mirza Shirazi, Mirza Hasan Shirazi. Okay, we're gonna quote one more scholar in this video, and this is a story of a scholar by the name of Mirza Abul Ma'ali Kalbasi. Mirza Abul Ma'ali Kalbasi Isfahani died in 1897, which is around 1315 Hijri. Now this one is going to be a little bit interesting. Okay, when did Ayatullah Zanjani tell this story? He's telling this story on the 29th of Jamadil Ula, 1430 Hijri. Okay, so 15 years ago. He is in this gathering, okay, as I said, in his office, or in his office basically, where sometimes before Maghrib his students gather and they discuss questions. Somebody must have asked him that از حضرت علی نقل شده که فرموده مخالفت با استخاره حرام است, that some people have narrated or attributed to you that you believe that going against the istikhara is haram. Okay, so if you do an istikhara and you go against it, that you believe that it is haram, you've given a fatwa. And then he says, بعید میدانم که من به این صراحت و محکمی گفته باشم. He says, I highly doubt that I said something like this with this much explicitness. Like he says, I highly doubt I gave a fatwa like this, right? And it's very interesting. When I one of the earlier times when I would, so as I said, I would visit the daftar of Ayatullah Zanjani, pretty often. I've been many times where they have these gatherings, and I've seen and observed so many different incidents, and it was very interesting. And it was very interesting that one time, there were times where students would ask questions and engage with him and debate with him, and sometimes they would tell him his own opinion on a matter, and just to kind of see that humility in him, where he would sometimes be like, hey, I don't remember what I said about this topic, maybe because he gave a class on that topic 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but obviously those topics have been recorded and written down, so students have access, but he doesn't always have access to those written notes. So I remember one time there was some discussion on Hajj, and there was something about the sa'i, if somebody forgets to do the sa'i during Hajj, but they were thinking the caravan leader is gonna tell them, but they forgot to tell them. There was something about that, and one of his students says that, oh, according to you, this is the ruling, this is what they have to do. And then he starts thinking about it. He's like, he basically saying that I forgot how I came to this conclusion. He's like, I don't remember. And this is about Hajj, and Hajj is, Ayatullah Zanjani is known for being one of the strongest scholars when it comes to the topic of Hajj. And for me to see that, oh wow, when he forgets, he's not trying to make things up, and he's not going to try and beat around the bush and just pretend like he knows. He just straight up said, oh, I don't remember. And he said, I'll have to go look into the notes again. And then even when the student quoted him, he started to think about how he got to that conclusion. He couldn't remember it, so he just left it. He says, I don't remember, I'll have to go look in. That was very inspiring for me to see, early on. So likewise, he is saying here, this, I highly doubt I would have said something like this, going against the istikhara is haram. This is a fatwa. He's saying, no, I wouldn't have said something like this. He says, but what I have said is what I have quoted a story. Yeah, he says, what I have said, and I have transmitted, and sometimes I have transmitted this story, is a story that Agha Yahya Ibadi Taliqani narrated to my father Ahmad Zanjani. And before that, this Agha Yahya's father, Sheikh Muhammad Hasan, has also transmitted the same story to my father as well. And that story has been mentioned in one of the books of Ayatullah Ahmad Zanjani called Al-Kalam Yajurul Kalam, ke chop na shode, that has not been published. Well, lo and behold, years later they published the book. And I would go to, so Sayyid Ahmad Zanjani had these two books that would kept getting referenced in some of the, like it would get referenced in Jurayee Az Darya, mostly. One was called Jangal-e Mawla, and one was called Al Kalam Yajurul Kalam. Okay, so there's many books here, and also Arba'iniyat. Arba'iniyat is the 40s book that was not published when I went to Qom. So these were published later on. They were still in manuscript format, but they would be referenced in the footnotes by Ayatullah Zanjani, and that's how I kind of figured out that these books exist in their original manuscript format. And the Arba'iniyat is the 40s podcast that is on the Mizan Institute. You can go check it out. It's for free. And then Jangal-e Mawla is a travel log of Ayatullah Ahmad Zanjani from when he moved from Zanjan to Qom, to the Hawza. This one I have not read, and I don't have access to it. But Al Kalam Yajurul Kalam was eventually published. Okay, so it's 2 volumes and it's published. This is Ahmad Zanjani. Maybe you've seen his picture on the 40s podcast. Al Kalam Yajurul Kalam, just on a side note, is a very interesting book. Okay, these are called, this genre of books is called Kashkul. Okay, in Kashkul genre, or the literature called Kashkul, scholars just put in anything in random order, right? So it would just be like one story and then a second story and then a third story, or like some interesting point. It's almost like a modern day blog posts. Okay, modern day blog posts where even with modern day blog posts, there's at least some sort of theme or niche, right? But these books, they don't necessarily have any specific theme. And this one in particular, it is called Al Kalam Yajurul Kalam. Al Kalam Yajurul Kalam is this phrase, which means that when you're sitting in a gathering of friends, you go and you start chilling, you start talking, and then you start jumping from one topic to another topic. So you finish talking about one topic, and then in that topic, you start talking about something else, and then, you reference something else, and then now you're talking about that topic. So you start talking about that, and then in that story, you mention something, some other point, so you start talking about that. Okay, imagine you're talking about, space travel with your friends, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, from space you can see Mount Everest. And then all of a sudden the topic changes about hiking, climbing the Mount Everest. And then from there, you start talking about all the people who have died on Mount Everest, and you focus on one person, and you start talking about his life and biography and how this guy prepared for it. And then you start talking about, then you're like, okay, you know what? You need to be fit to be able to climb. So you start talking about fitness and going to the gym and training and diet. So you see one gathering of your friend circle, you just discuss 10 different topics, but there was no theme to it. You just kind of jumped around. That's what Al Kalam Yajurul Kalam means. So this book is literally that. He writes one story, and then from that previous story, something that comes to his mind, he starts talking about another story, or a third point, or some fifth interesting point. It's a very interesting book. Once again, these books, they help you understand the history of Muslims and their intellectual thought, especially, as I said, in the last couple of centuries. All of this later on, a decade later, as I continue to study in Qom, will help me understand the psyche of the Muslims, the psyche of Muslim scholars, what was going on, what was happening in Iran, what was happening in the South Asia, Middle East, because at the same time we're being colonized as well. So how are they thinking? And all of this stuff is extremely important, right? And then when you study classical fiqh, and then you're trying to figure out how to make it make sense today, if you're not aware of the changes that have happened in the way of thinking, okay, if you don't know, we have changed the way we think today, and you won't know that unless you look at these books. You really will be a lost person. You're not gonna be able to navigate your way in the modern era. And this goes for even students in the Hawza or anybody who's trying to even study. You must expand your horizons, and particularly in my opinion, you must study the last 200-300 years and see what has happened to the Muslim world, and especially their way of thinking. How did we used to think? How did we fall behind in terms of our intellectual and civilization? And what do we have to do to get out of it? Not these cliche and sugar-coated answers and solutions and copy-paste solutions and so on. No, we have to come up with novel solutions. Anyways, that was a pretty big side note. Anyways, Ayatollah Zanjani says that Agha Yahya and his father have narrated to my father, and they say that, basically Ayatullah Mirza Abul Maali Kalbasi himself narrates the story. He says, Ayatollah Mirza Abul Maali was a teacher and a sort of akhlaqi inspiration also for Ayatollah Burujardi. He was from the teachers of Ayatollah Burujardi, and he was an extraordinary man. And amongst the people of expertise, they would say that Ayatollah Mirza Abul Maali, if he was not better and stronger than his father, who was a marja taqleed called Haj Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi, if he was not better than his father, he was not any less. Very extraordinary person. And also in terms of his akhlaq, he was, a top tier person. And we heard from Ayatollah Safi Gulpaygani. Okay, Ayatollah Safi Gulpaygani has just, recently passed away now. He was a student of Ayatollah Burujardi. So he says that I have heard from Ayatollah Burujardi that we would go to the house of Ayatollah Mirza Abul Maali for classes. We would go to his house for classes. One day I went to his house, and Ayatollah Mirza Abul Maali Kalbasi, he himself came down. So the class must have happened in some room upstairs. So he himself came down and he opened the door, and the staircase was very narrow, so two people could not climb at the same time. So one person would have to climb. And Ayatollah Burujardi said that I kind of waited till my teacher goes up. But because I was Sayyid, because I was from the Sadat, he did not dare walk in front of me. And he was not willing to walk in front of me. He waited till Ayatollah Burujardi, who was a student, walks basically first. And he says he made me majboor. He kind of pretty much forced me that I must walk before him. Okay. And Ayatollah Safi says that also from another scholar I'm quoting, that this Ayatollah Mirza Abul Kalbasi, Mirza Abul Maali Kalbasi, he would not dare sit on, while giving class, he would not dare sit in a position where he was kind of like higher than the, than a Sayyid, than the Sadat. And interestingly, it's interesting because some of the times the teachers, seniors, ulama, when they're sitting in their offices and giving classes, many students are sitting on the ground, but for them they'll bring like a small chair or something. But he's saying, look, he would not dare sit in a position where he is sitting higher than the Sadat. So Ayatollah Safi is saying that, quoting from this other guy named Agha Khademi, he says that because of that, we would also make sure that we are not sitting in a position where we are higher than our teacher. So what we would do is we would sit in a way that we would be facing each other on the same level. Okay. Anyways, this point is just about his akhlaq. He's not talking about the real story. Hasn't started yet. Saying his akhlaq was really good. Okay. Now the story, because remember the story started with the question about istikhara. Okay. He says Ayatollah Mirza Abul Maali himself quotes this. He says, my father was of the view that going against the istikhara is haram. Okay, my father. Okay, what was the father's name? His father's name was Haj Muhammad Ibrahim Kalbasi. Okay, who was basically, he was basically his father. Why? Why is it haram? Why did he believe it's haram? Because he says, Daf'i zarar muhtamal wajib ast. Daf'i zarar muhtamal basically means that when you have a probability of a harm, okay, so let's say, for example, there is a probability that if I step out of this room, I don't know, God forbid, I can come into an accident, okay, or so let's just say that I can come into an accident. What is the probability of that? Okay, 5%, 2%. Okay, there's not much of a possibility. Probability is very, very low. Okay, but now imagine the probability. So that's the So that's the probability is very low. Now, obviously, if the probability is very high, then the darar that I also have is also very severe. Let's say the probability is 90%. Let's say the probability is 90%. Is this a risk I'm willing to take? Am I willing to take this risk to suffer the possible harm that I may get hit by a car? Most probably not. Okay, most probably not. Why? because the harm that I'm gonna get is such a severe harm that is gonna damage me for pretty much the rest of my life. But if the harm is, not that severe, let's say I say there's 90% chance I may walk and I may, I don't know, cut my finger or something. It's not a very serious harm. Let's say even the possibility of me cutting my finger is around 99%. Okay, but the darar is not very severe, correct? So sometimes what you have to do is look at the nature of the possible harm. Okay, nature of the possible harm. If there's like a, let's say, 5% chance that if I walk out, there's a 5% chance that, I don't know, I will die. Like there's a 5% chance I will die. 5% real chance. Then at that time you might be like, hey, I'm not even taking the risk. Someone might say, hey, but it's just a 5% chance. There's a 95% chance you may not die. But you're gonna say, hey, but the problem is that 5%, if it does come true, the harm that it entails is a type of harm that's it, my life is finished. Okay, so that harm, even if there was a 1% chance of me getting harmed with that, I'm not gonna take it. So the nature of the harm is also calculated over here. Okay, so that's what this entire Daf' Darar Muhtamal is. And basically what he's saying, the istikhara, the probability of istikhara happening, he says qarib bi yaqeen است. He says the istikhara, the probability of it happening is, almost certain, almost reaching a level of certainty. Okay, somebody can ask him, how do you know it's reaching certainty? Okay, he says, well, I have a couple of experiences that I went through that, I use basically to prove that going against istikhara is not allowed. There are some other technical points here as well, because it seems like, because Daf' Darar Muhtamal, for those of you who can kind of are familiar with this is a wujub aqli. Okay, if somebody says it is wajib to follow it or it is haram to go against it, this is not haram in the sharia yet. Okay, this is a haram aql. The aql says don't put yourself in this harm. So you have to then prove this other principle that says everything the aql says, the sharia also says. Okay, you have to go and prove that principle as well, which many scholars today don't really accept it with this sort of term, this sort of a sentence structure. They have a lot of issues with it. In that sentence, everything the aql says, the sharia also says. No, they don't really accept that today in this format. So, but this assumes that these ulama used to believe in this principle, right? That's the only way you can jump. You're gonna jump from saying my aql says that it is prohibited and haram to go against the istikhara, and therefore the sharia also must say it's haram. So that's just some technical point I'm mentioning on the side. If you didn't understand it, ignore it. Okay, but what's the story? The story. So look, Ayatullah Zanjani is also saying these are shawahid. He's bringing stories to corroborate his view. Okay, not evidence. Okay, shawahid, testimonial evidence. Okay, what's the story? He says that there was a bazari. Okay, bazari, people of the bazaar in Tehran, these were people who had the money. Okay, they had money and they were very influential. Okay, so if you look at some of the political discussions and some of the societal issues, you're gonna see the reference to the bazaris of Tehran, people who were the merchants in Tehran. They were very, very influential. They had money. They were very politically strong as well, as in they had like the lobbying power, right? So he says that someone from the Bazari Haya Haji Kalbasi, okay, someone from the I guess financial supporters and supporters basically of Haji Kalbasi had invited him on one of the nights for a da'wat, for dinner. Haji Kalbasi also said, okay, yeah, I'll come. Okay, and he promised him. When he goes, Haji Kalbasi, okay, he realizes that he did not do an istikhara to go to his house. And the practice of Haji Kalbasi was that anytime he would, before he would promise someone that he would come to his house, he would always do an istikhara. And he forgot to do istikhara. So then he goes and he does the istikhara for that night, and the istikhara comes out really bad. So, and then the istikhara for the next night came out good. So then he goes and tries to find that bazari, that merchant, and he says, hey, listen, I cannot come to your house because I did the istikhara and there's no way I'm coming tonight. I'm going to come the night after. the merchant gets really, really upset. He gets upset and he says, Agha, because of out of you, out of your respect, I went out of my way and I invited all the ulama of the town, all the ulama of the city, and I called them, and how on earth am I gonna go and tell every single one of them that the invitation is cancelled and come the next day? It's gonna ruin their plans as well. Haji Kalbasi said, you go and tell them that I am the one who was requesting them to come the next night. Okay, so don't take it on yourself, blame it on me. So this person, the merchant went and basically did that. Now, Haji Kalbasi says, remember, he's the one, Ayatullah Mirza Abul Ma'ali is the one quoting this tradition, right, from his father. So he says now that the rasam, the sort of the culture and the tradition of the ulama, okay, the ones that would happen, all night chill sessions of the ulama, was such that it would go, almost past midnight, 1-2 nights into the late nights. How? So he says, for example, in the beginning, 10-20 minutes, they would talk about some issues, some ahkami issues. Then they would go on, so there would be a speaker who would go on the minbar, and then 2-3 hours after that, they would go and just talk and have their discussions. And now these are also called gades. Okay, gades, we would attend so many of these, okay, with many different ulama, particularly 1-2 ulama in Qom were like not 1-2, like quite a few of them are well known for this, especially Thursday nights, Wednesday nights, or some of them even on Fridays. You go to their home, their homes are just open. Anyone can just literally walk in. That's how insane it is. Anyone can just walk in, and you would hear of so many stories and so many incidents, and yeah, it would be really, really interesting. And you would have sometimes random like scholars and muhakkikeen and researchers coming in from Tehran and Isfahan and this, and then you would just listen to them and observe. And there would be times that the marja or the mujtahid would want to engage with us as well, because we were Western students, and they would want to know what are we up to, and it was very, very interesting. So like Sayyid Ahmad Madadi was one of those people. Wednesday nights we would go to his house, and then he would just was very, very interesting. And there's a lot of stories that we can quote from him, and a lot of points that he would mention. There would be manuscript experts sitting over there, and it would just be so interesting to observe their conversations. Anyway, so this point over here is about that, right? So he's saying, hey, so the sessions would go very long. That night, the night for which he did the istikhara, and the istikhara came out bad, he says around 2.5 hours after, like later in the evening, the roof of the building or the house or whatever, the place, it fell down. And if any of us were there, we would have basically gotten crushed under the roof. Okay, so what does it mean? He says the istikhara came out bad, and look, the istikhara, this is why it came out bad. The roof was going to fall that night. Okay, so Ayatollah Mirza Abul Ma'ali is saying, my father used to believe in this, and these are the reasons why he started to believe in it. Okay, the probability over here, you want to avoid the darar muhtamal. There's a possible harm that you're going to fall into, and it's wajib to kind of stay away from this possible harm, whereas the possibility, according to him, based on the istikhara, is very high. He says another story is that when I was in Najaf, I was, busy studying, and at one point of my life, I became blind. Then I was in the haram of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and I did tawassul to him, and I started to speak to him. I said, the eyes are from one of the blessings, and it seems like Allah has not find me befitting to have this blessing, and it seems like He does not want me to be a source of guidance for other people, and to be a help for the transmission of the Sharia, because a scholar without the eyes cannot do anything for the people. Okay, that's it. He's going to become blind. And it's obvious that we do not have this liyaqat, yani we don't have this opportunity and this honor to be in the service of Allah, basically. Funny enough, or rather interesting enough, there was once a teacher in our school. I did not study with him, but some of my colleagues actually studied with him. He was blind. He was fully blind. And to be honest, for the first couple of weeks, we did not even realize he was blind, because he was just, his eyes would be open, and he would be looking around and walking around, and one of the students' brothers would be with him, and I guess he never told us, or I don't know what, but we never figured out. And he was a teacher of Ulema, And even the students in the beginning couldn't figure out that he actually cannot read, and so because they couldn't see the book he had. Anyways, down the line, we figured out that he's actually blind, and the Lum'a that he was reading, Sharh of Lum'a, was actually written in Braille, right? Braille in Arabic, and it was like, whoa, how on earth is he, teaching classical fiqh, which has been written in Braille in Arabic, and it's not an easy text to teach. The pronouns are going somewhere, and so we were like, hey, how's he doing this? But he was apparently a very good teacher. I did not attend his class, but my colleagues were there, and they said he was a good, very interesting, excellent teacher. So, anyways, that time, in the time of Agha Kalbasi, Abul Maali Kalbasi, they didn't have Braille. So, anyways, he starts to cry, and he says, over there, I was inspired that, hey, the ilaj, the cure is within your own hands. And he says, I realized that there's some sand in my hands, and I rubbed the sand on my eyes, and my eyes opened up, and I see that there is a ring stone that is with me, and I use this ring stone for shifa anytime that I needed to. So he says, I made that stone into a proper ring. And then he says, one time the house of my house was broken down. It was ruined. And the plan was to reconstruct the entire wall. And he says, I was also helping. So his father was also helping around. And but he goes for namaz. He comes back while in namaz, he realizes that the stone had fallen somewhere while the wall was being constructed. And he says, so people tell him, look, it's lost, forget about it. It's just a stone. Who cares? And he will say, no way, we in bayad paida shavad waman paida mikunam. He says, no way, you gotta find this. We better find this stone. And he starts to do istikhara. On what part of the wall do we need to break down to, basically figure out the thing. So he starts doing istikhara. He says, should we break this part of the wall? He does the istikhara, it says good or bad, whatever it is. And then, anyways, keeps doing istikhara. He says, okay, this is not needed. So he keeps dividing the wall until he gets to the point where, the wall says, you can break the wall here. Anyways, they break that part of the wall, and people say, hey, there's nothing here. Even after breaking this wall, there's nothing here. And then finally, he starts looking around, and they find the stone in something small, which was the size of like some seed or something, and then the stone was actually in there, and they end up finding it. Okay, so that was the second story. And he says, look, I'm just mentioning these stories. So once again, Ayatullah Mirza Abul Maali, quoting from his father, he's saying, he was just quoting these stories بعنوان شاهد نقل میکرد که مخالفت با استخاره جایز نیست. He's like, I'm just quoting these as testimonial evidence that, look, going against the istikhara is not allowed. Jaiz neist. Even over here, he didn't say, Ayatullah Zanjani is not saying haram ast. So, they have to be careful with the words. Sayyid Zanjani says, I have narrated this story, and I said that going against the istikhara, there's a possibility that you may fall into harm. And therefore, it's ihtiyat to not go against it. That's what I said. So I told Johnny saying, that's what I said. I didn't say it's haram to go against it. I said, look, there's a possibility you may fall into harm, so don't go against it. And then he also says, he said, look, but there are many cases where people have gone against the istikhara and nothing happened. Nothing happened, and everything was all good. He says, but it is also possible that nothing happens because some of those istikharas are just so pointless and useless. There's no real significance. But if the istikhara has, some significance and there's a real reason to do it, then, do ihtiyat and, don't just abandon it. He says, Sahib Rawzat, one of the scholars of bibliographies, he says that, I have heard that Sultan al-Ulama, one of the scholars that we had, was the son-in-law of one of the three Safavid, Shahs, either Shah Abbas Awal or Shah Abbas Dowam or Shah Safi. And then the author himself is saying that I did istikhara to figure out whose name should I write as the son-in-law, and I wrote the name of Shah Abbas Awal. And the istikhara came out good, and then I later checked into the sources, and I realized that yes, he was indeed the son-in-law of Shah Abbas Awal. So Ayatullah, Zanjani says कि boy इनके महल इस्तिखारा ना बूद. He's like, what does it have to do with istikhara? Right? But he's like, okay, but it came out true. So you're not going to use that as evidence for something. He says, but, agar mahal istikhara bashad, qatan durust darmiya. He said, but if it's a proper place of istikhara, then, it will come out true. Now, some of you may be wondering, but Sayyid Ali, you made a whole dictations on the istikhara, and you said, hey, this is not even real. There's different types of istikharas. A certain type of istikhara is the only correct one. So, but here you have Ayatullah Zanjani saying, hey, it's okay, it's not a bad thing. You can do it. Just do ihtiyat. How do you reconcile? Yeah, you reconcile because you're not. None of these ulama are ma'soom. Okay, on the one hand, you have ulama who are going to say it's wrong. On the other hand, you have ulama who are saying it's okay. One alim is saying, hey, it's haram to go against it. Eventually, as you study and you start, at the end of the day, what will matter to you as a student is not what the person's opinion is. You're going to try and figure out why is it that they're saying this, right? Why are they coming to this conclusion? And that's what matters at the end of the day. Okay, some of them were, maybe not actually that well researched in these topics. Maybe they didn't even have the sources. Maybe they didn't even have the books and resources to figure out. So nowadays we have all these CDs and tools and softwares. We can quickly research and figure out how does entire istikhara trend start. Believe me, there's many times that back in the days they couldn't figure these things out, right? So a lot of this historical analysis and figuring out trends and all of this stuff is very, very recent, less than 100 years ago, to be honest. It's that recent. So you can reconcile these things. You can like and appreciate certain ulama, but don't have to agree with all of them. As you will see later stories, there will be certain ulama that some of you will have a lot of problems with. You're gonna be like, hey, why are these ulama have these views? But look, they had these certain views, and the point here is to show you that there's such a vast and diverse set of ulama with different ideas, different conducts, different practices, and look at their akhlaq also. It's akhlaq also is, they don't all behave the same way all the time. Some of them behave a little bit more aggressive, some of them are a little bit laid back, some of them are chill, some of them joke a little bit more. These are all normal human traits, and that is the whole point. In fact, that is the whole point of this book, which as I said, the entire book was something that changed the way I thought, and this is what it's basically doing. Anyways, I hope you appreciated this episode, and inshallah we will continue in the next episode with Sayyid Muhammad Fisharki, Sayyid Murtaza Kashmiri, and Hakim Jahangir Khan Kashqai, Akhund Mulla Muhammad, basically Akhund Khurasani, and you have some Akhund Khurasani is very long, and then you have Ayatullah Sheikh Muhammad Taqi Isfahani, Maruf Shaqai Najafi, Sayyid Muhammad Kazim Tabatabai Yazdi, and Muhammad Taqi Shah. Anyways, very, very interesting scholars coming up next. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to comment, please, because your comments do, I do read them, and I do, inshallah, try to respond as well. But yeah, inshallah, please make sure you try and share these videos with other people as well. If you're a member, you're already seeing this much earlier. If you're not a member, you're seeing this pretty late, weeks later, from the members. But inshallah, if you have an opportunity to sign up as a paid member, feel free to do that as well. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.